Reflections from Torch Trust, focusing on Christian faith and sight loss.
Hello and a very warm welcome to Reflections. I'm your host, Marilyn Baker, and this is the show from Torch Trust that focuses on disability and faith in today's world. If you're a regular listener, you'll have heard that description many times. And this week, we really are taking a closer look at how disability and faith connect, or rather, how there are sometimes barriers to that connection. We hear all too often that some blind and partially sighted people feel unable to attend church or to really participate in church communities. There can be a number of reasons for this, and at Torch we want to break down those barriers and help churches truly become welcoming spaces for people with sight loss. You might be wondering how. Well, our producer Grace recently spoke with Becky and Lynn about Torch's upcoming Sight Loss Sunday event.
First of all, for anyone that's not heard of Sight Loss Sunday, can you tell me what it is?
Sight Loss Sunday is a Sunday where churches are encouraged to reflect on things around sight loss and faith, and they can do that in several ways. We have resources that they can use. So the idea is that people have a service and they can use as much or as little of those resources as they want to. So it could, for example, be that maybe they have a blind or partially sighted congregation member who would like to lead the service or part of the service. They can also encourage them to do a reading, for example, and they can also help in other ways. So, for example, we did Sight Loss Sunday last year, and I led part of the service, which I do anyway, because I often lead worship. But then we have another visually impaired guy in the church who hasn't done much in terms of getting involved before, because he hasn't been so sure and confident about what he can do. So he got to help with the communion, for example. So it's just a real golden opportunity for blind and partially sighted people to get involved in one way or another in church, and for churches to reflect on what it means to have sight loss or be blind or partially sighted and be part of the family of Christ.
So why did Torch start Sight Loss Sunday?
So it was set up 3 years ago, and really we kind of set it up to have three main aims and purposes. It was like, firstly, to really raise awareness about sight loss in church and the local community. So really help churches become more aware so that they can be inclusive. We also wanted to introduce churches to Torch's Sight Loss Friendly Church initiative. So it's a really great way to do that as well, so that they can kind of continue to have ongoing advice and support from us. And thirdly, it was just to encourage Christians to nurture people's gifts and talents and abilities, and recognize that everyone has gifts and talents, and they can, everyone can use them in a church and in the life of the church.
Why is Sight Loss Sunday so important? Why is this something that matters, that churches should care about?
Because it's really important to understand the prevalence of disability in our society and not see it as anything that is different or weird, or at least different in a weird way. And as a sight loss charity, we focus on visual impairment and losing your sight. But what we often hear from churches is that focusing on that opened their eyes to other people's challenges or difficulties that they have in church life. So, for example, somebody did Sight Loss Sunday last year, and then as a result of that, they have become a lot more inclusive in getting other people to help. So people with poor hearing, people who might not be able to walk, and it's a place to start to just foster inclusion and encourage that, because we are all different and we all come to church with our life experience, and Unfortunately, ignorance around certain life experiences means that sometimes people can feel like they're on the outside and not being valued as much as perhaps they feel like they should be or could be.
Yeah, and I think also, I think there's far more people who maybe are blind or partially sighted in our communities than churches are aware of as well. So it's a really great way for churches to become more aware of that. There is a statistic that we often quote, that this has come from RNIB, and they say that 20% of any given community will experience sight loss in their lifetime. So 20% of people in a community will experience sight loss in their lifetime. So I think, there is definitely a lot of churches think that there's nobody in their church who experiences that, but there probably is. And there's certainly people in their community. So we hope this really helps raise awareness and help people reach out into their community as well.
So what are the ways that people can get involved? What can churches actually do? You've mentioned the resources, so tell me a bit more about them.
The resources contain everything from sermon notes to prayer points to Sunday school material for children, to hymns and song suggestion. So churches can use these resources in any way they feel might be suitable for them, as much or as little as possible. And you don't even have to do this on the actual Sight Loss Sunday, which is the 15th of October. I mean, it would be great if as many people as possible could do it on that Sunday, but we just want to encourage people to have Sight Loss Sunday, and that's kind of our main aim.
Yeah, I mean, we've got so many resources available. So there's basically 2 sets available that were written over the last 2 years. The first set is themed around Is Seeing Believing, and it focuses on the many and various gifts people with sight loss have, and how they can enrich their church community. So it's really encouraging churches to recognise people's gifts. And then the second set is themed around Made in God's Image, and focuses on how blind and partially sighted people are as unique and valuable as we all are, as everyone is. So there's two lots of resources available, and you can mix and match, and you can use as little or as much as you want. As Lynn mentioned, there's just so many different things there for you to use. So there's going to be something for everyone. So, just have a good look at what's available and see what might suit your church.
Can you just remind people of where they need to go to find those resources?
So all the resources are available on our website. So the easiest thing is to go to torchtrust.org. And if you go to the churches drop-down list, and you'll find Sight Loss Sunday there on the drop-down list. So click on that and you'll find everything that you need.
And of course, we would be very grateful if you do use them. If you could give us a little email about how you found it and which resources you use, because we would love the feedback.
Well, it was great to get Becky and Lynn's perspectives on why Sight Loss Sunday matters and the difference it can make to blind and partially sighted people. And now I'd like to welcome a few more to weigh in on the topic.
When a church hasn't been inclusive, it's made me feel like rubbish. It's made me feel excluded and also on the fringe. And it drives me to the edge sometimes of the sort of community.
It made me doubt whether I was in the right place.
It's inevitable, I think, but it's also a bit disappointing that even in the 21st century, there are still lots of people out there who don't really understand sight loss and who don't really understand what it is that people with sight loss need and what it is that people with sight loss can do.
So every 6 minutes, someone in the UK starts to lose their sight. That's 250 people every day.
Essentially, Jesus was someone who was radically inclusive. He was someone who always welcomed and embraced those folks who, for whatever reason, found themselves on the margins. The church, as the body of Christ, it's up to us to be radically inclusive.
I went to one church, which I won't name, some time ago, and everybody was given a job to do and they were given responsibility. When it came to me, I was sort of ignored. It was just like I wasn't there. And when I asked, they said, well, you don't have to do anything to be valid. But actually, I felt invalidated. It just felt like an excuse for giving me nothing, expecting me to be happy with that.
Well, I think it's very sad when churches do just think of somebody as the blind person rather than because they are a Christian and have ministries that can contribute to the church.
Everyone has the right to a fulfilling spiritual life, but feeling that you can't join in or you're not part of the congregation often leads to people just not attending church.
One of the main ways in which being as inclusive as we can be, being a sight loss friendly church has had on our visually impaired folks is just that sense of real belonging to a community of faith.
The first question they asked me was, how can we help? How can we do things to assist you in being a participator within the church service? And we soon discovered that the best thing for them to do was to email me the service with the hymns on a Thursday or a Friday. That way I could change it into a format that I could actually read and see.
I've been involved in things. I was involved in the coffee mornings, which raised money for the church building, in the way that I actually was allowed to do the washing up and those things, which, though it seems a small task, it does include you, and you get to attend things and you feel like you're making some contribution.
Well, I'm now worshipping at Coventry Cathedral, where I sing in the choir, and that was really quite special, that the cathedral had confidence in me to be able to sing in the cathedral choir, and that was really quite heartening.
Still am involved in the music group. I was always helping with the songs, playing piano, playing guitar, or even playing drums. So that was a real help.
I was originally a deacon back in 2010. I served for 6 years. I did 2 stints, and I helped with communion and all the things that deacons do.
I'm actually on the church council. I run 2 of the community groups that we have within the church.
On various occasions I'm able to preach the sermon, and I do Bible readings, and I run a Bible study once a month.
We want churches to be able to welcome everybody. So at Torch we really want to work alongside you and help you to be sight loss friendly, so that people can have that warm welcome and really feel part of a congregation.
You're listening to Reflections, and today we're exploring Sight Loss Sunday, a day set up by Torch to wake the church up to sight loss and support blind and partially sighted people to be truly included in their church communities. Earlier in the show, Becky and Lynn from Torch mentioned the wonderful resources that have been put together to help churches run Sight Loss Sunday services, and I'd like to share one of those resources with you now. Just like all our Sight Loss Sunday resources, it's available on our website and is completely free to use. We'll be hearing the audio version, but there's also a video version available. So without further delay, here is Ife Akintunde with a beautiful reflection.
Today is Sight Loss Sunday, and I was just wondering, what would it be like if everybody was as involved in church, regardless of sight loss or in fact any other disability? To answer that question, I have to look to what Jesus did and what Jesus said. And as I do that, I'm hoping that all of you, especially in church, would remember and act like Jesus would. So 2 passages in the Gospel of John came to mind. The first was when Jesus approached a paralyzed man in a pool. Now there were many people who were in that pool and had not received their healing, but he walked up to this individual and he said, "Why are you not healed?" The man said, "Well, the problem is there is an angel who stirs the water, and when that happens I need someone to get me there. And if no one gets me there, another person gets healed. So what did Jesus do? Jesus healed him. And every time I think of that passage, I think of the communication between Jesus and this young person. He said to him, I want to know what you need. That is the first question that I think we should ask anyone who comes to church. What do you need to be a full and active member of church? But in John chapter 9, I come to a passage very specifically about a blind person. And here, the conversation is between Jesus and his disciples before he actually meets the blind person. They ask, is it because of the sin of the father or the mother that this person is blind? Jesus said no. He said, so that the works of God may be made manifest in his life. And every time I think of myself, I ask myself the question, God's works, are they manifest in my life? And I say to myself, the more God's works are made manifest in my life, the less disabled I am. It is interesting, actually, that Jesus did heal this blind person. But in doing so, he made a very important point to me, that it wasn't my blindness that defined my disability. The same question is true when I go to church. It is not my blindness that defines my disability. In fact, the church is described as the body of Christ, a body that has many parts, and each part plays its part. Each part of the body is active. If it is not active, if it's not doing its individual thing with its individual abilities, then the body is actually disabled. So if you have a blind person who cannot fully participate in church life, then the entire church is missing out, in fact, on the gifts and the things that that person with sight loss can bring to church. So I'd encourage everyone to look at people with sight loss as people who can make a wonderful contribution to the life of the church, to ask the question, what can I do to make that happen? And to remove from themselves the presumption that this person is blind because of something that may be in their past. The more important thing isn't what was in the past, but the future that God has planned for us. Because after all, we're all in his image, and he says, I know the plans I have for you, plans for your good, plans to prosper. Thank you very much.
My God, how great you are. You are almighty, creator of all things. How great you are. For there is no one, and there price of sin, and then you set me free. It causes me to sing, causes me to bring my love to you. My God, how great you are. You are almighty, creator of all things. How great you are. For there is no one, and there is nothing that can compare with you. How great you are. How great you are. How great you are. And that was my song, My God, How Great You Are. Actually, I didn't compose it. It was written by a friend, but I wanted to record it. Well, we're almost out of time for today, but don't forget, Sight Loss Sunday will be on the 15th of October this year, and we would love to encourage your church to join in. To get hold of our wonderful resources, visit torchtrust.org, click on Churches, and then click on Sight Loss Sunday in the drop-down menu. If you have comments or questions about anything else to do with Torch or the Reflection Show, then why not give us a ring on 01858 438 260 or email info@torchtrust.org 01858 438 260 or email info@torchtrust.org. Until next week, from me, Marilyn, and everyone on the Reflections team, goodbye and God bless.
You've been listening to Reflections from Torch Trust.